Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is a question that I've been getting over and over from so many people I speak with. That's Jews and non-Jews alike, all lovers of Israel, are asking me to explain Israel's marriage of religion and politics. For anyone who is not an Israeli, the confluence stymies and mystifies them. They are so flummoxed that it even takes them a few minutes to listen carefully and understand my rephrasing of their question. I begin by explaining that in Israel, unlike in the United States, the issue is not church and state. In Israel, it is religion and state. Yes, church is a metaphor for religion, but that metaphor simply cannot work in Israel, i.e., the Jewish state. Clearly, the swapping of the word synagogue for church is doable, but synagogue and state neither resonates nor does it have the same meaning. And that, most significantly, is because in Israel itself, Judaism is more than simply a building, like a synagogue, or a property. In Israel, Judaism is more than prayer. In Israel, Judaism is even more than God. In Israel, Judaism is the pervading culture. In Israel, Judaism imbues almost every activity, almost every walk of life. Everything, from the calendar to the names of the days of the week, from family vacations to school holidays, from the food that is eaten to the music that is played, the poetry that is read, and the language that is spoken. In Israel, Judaism is the epicenter upon which everything else revolves. There is no way of offering a greeting or departing wish on Friday night or Saturday other than saying in Hebrew, "Have a pleasant Shabbat," Shabbat Shalom. The very name of the state Israel and the choice of locating the Jewish state in its ancestral homeland is in itself a combination of Judaism and politics, religion and state. In Israel, Judaism and politics are inseparable. One cannot be divorced from the other. And that's why when you stop and think about it, it only makes sense that in Israel there will be religious political parties. And it only makes sense that those parties will want to imbue more Jewish content into their schools, into their lives, into their Israeli culture. And in the same way, it only makes sense that secular Jews will say, enough already. And that's the counterbalance. And that explains the tension between Israeli politics and Judaism, between those who want more of one of those and those who want less of the other. Note that it is more of one or none of the other. That's not what it is. It's not the elimination of Judaism over the other politics. Statistically, no Jew in Israel wants to totally remove all Jewish character from Israel. That's statistically. But that's another column on the protection of minority rights, and that's for another time. The tension that has captured the world's attention right now is not new. It's just more intense. Over the past almost 50 years, since the election of Menachem Begin in 1977, Israel has undergone a steady move from the political left to the political right. That move has meant that political parties and their leaders became much warmer to Jewish values, traditional Jewish values. Today, the vast majority of Israelis line up center-right. The extreme left has imploded, the moderate left has virtually no following, and the right, while the stronger presence, is not, despite world news, of Israel's new government, one big united bloc. The right is not one big united bloc at all. It's all blended into one conglomerate. They are different parties, each with its own unique characteristics, joined together as part of the Netanyahu government, with three very different political platforms and representations, and that's just the religious parties we're talking about. While the religious Zionists, people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, are fervently religious, their political emphasis is on nationalism and settlement. That puts them in fierce conflict with United Torah Judaism, the Ashkenazi Haredi parties, and Shas, which represents Edom Mizrach, or Oriental Jews, Jews from Arab lands. Each group has their own agenda and will fight to get allocations for their constituents. Mostly, that is, by the way, they want money for schools and housing. That's most of what they want in their allocations and their power. In the United States, the separation of church and state is protected by the United States Constitution. In Europe, rabbis are paid by the state. In Europe, the official rabbis are employees of the state, as is their entire office from assistants to secretaries. The Establishment Clause in the United States Constitution is totally irrelevant in the Jewish state, because by definition, the establishment of the Jewish state would violate the Establishment Clause. The First Amendment has two very important elements, regarding religion at least: establishment and free exercise. This is what it reads: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's it. Then freedom of press follows it. While Israel embraced Judaism, America's founders were running away from religious persecution from places where governments created religious laws in government. Maryland, let's say, had Catholic laws incorporated into their system. So New Jersey and Pennsylvania rejected that and created non-establishment clauses in their state constitutions. Most people are left surprised by my explanation, surprised to learn that Israel is still a laboratory when it comes to religion and state. Overall, the experiment forces important discussions and valuable dialogue about the content and quality of life in a state run by, organized by Jews. A state that will continue to survive and flourish, not despite, but because of the disputes among those fervently who love and want only the best for their country. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post. It was written by Adam Milstein and was published on January 16th, 2023. The column is entitled, "The Undeniable Link Between Anti-Semitism and America's Decline." Opinion, subtitled, "It starts with the Jews, but never ends with the Jews." Milstein presents an important and obvious argument that people still refuse to see. Anti-Semitism is just the beginning. There is always something afterwards. This is how Milstein begins. It has become a truism that Jews are history's canary in the coal mine. Across cultures and continents, where Jews have flourished, so have societies around them. Where Jews have faced persecution and expulsion, it is usually a sign that darker forces are taking hold that will degrade, diminish, and often destroy the broader society. The examples of this phenomenon are numerous and profound. Spain's golden era of Jewish achievement brought unprecedented success to the kingdom. Its expulsion of the Jews resulted in the country's ultimate decline. Jews were central to Germany's vibrant intellectual, artistic, and economic life in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Hitler's evil and irrational hatred not only decimated European Jewry, but it also destroyed Germany and tens of millions of lives across Europe as well. With these history lessons in mind, how should we view the rising anti-Semitism in America today? As an inevitable reality that Jews have faced since Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? As a specific threat to our Jewish American community that we have to fight for our own sake? Or as a danger to America and the core values that have been the bedrock of this country's rise? Milstein asks a very important question. Now he continues with a history of anti-Semitism in America, and he shows and gives explanation of what drives this anti-Semitism. This is how he continues. The four main drivers of anti-Semitism in America, on the radical right, on the radical left, among radical Muslims, and among black supremacists, such as Louis Farrakhan, all happen to also hate America. These groups and their supporters all seek to undermine the core values of free speech, democracy, individual rights, equality, and religious pluralism. And they all see Jews, who have long championed these values, as easy prey. We are a useful target in their bigger struggle of changing America beyond recognition, in line with their extreme ideology. Milstein concludes his column by writing an important point that we should all remember. He writes, "Although Jews are a major target of these groups, the struggle is not really about us. The ultimate target has always been America. American Jews need to create alliances with other Americans focused on helping the public to understand that anti-Semitism, spreading BDS, CRT, ethnic studies, and DEI are first and foremost a threat to our core American values. Nothing less than the future of America and the Jewish American communities at stake. This is an extremely important and interesting read and a compelling argument. The column is certainly worth thinking about. Next up is an editorial from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on January 19th, 2023. Remember, an editorial is the point of view of the editorial board of a newspaper. And while it is scripted by one person, it represents the opinion of the board, the paper itself, the editorial board. This editorial is entitled, "Here's How Israel Can Work Toward a National Consensus," editorial, subtitled, "Is There a World in Which the Government Shared Its Plans Before Moving Ahead?" The editorial begins. There's been a lot of debate and accusations this week about whether Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Likud party were clear on their plan to overhaul the judiciary and whether voters knew what their intentions were before the November 1st election. No one needs to be surprised, Netanyahu said. What we said before the election, we are doing, and will do after the election. Perhaps Netanyahu, Justice Minister Yariv Levin, and Likud could have better explained the plan during the election campaign. Perhaps other parties should have raised a red flag then, so that the electorate could have been better informed. But this is a moot point now, given that today the issue is clearly tearing the nation apart. The editors explain that a major crisis is in the works, but don't despair. There's a way out. The editors write, "Here's what could happen if it's not happening already to resolve this crisis. The president should continue holding a dialogue with all sides in an attempt to reach consensus on an acceptable legal reform plan. The Prime Minister and Justice Minister should be open to discussing the issue with the opposition, and the opposition should welcome such an opportunity. In order for this to be successful, perhaps the government should appoint a well-respected personality to mediate between the sides and come up with a judicial compromise. Justice, justice you shall pursue, Deuteronomy 16:20, entreats us. Aspiring to Solomonic wisdom and a legal reform plan acceptable to the majority of Israelis should now top the government's agenda. The idea is sound, but will it be heard by the right people? Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to talk about 6 cartoons today. The first 3 are about George Santos, the liar and newly seated congressman from New York. We must laugh. It's almost as if another Santos lie emerges every day. One is more outlandish than the next, and Santos has certainly taken the idea of political lies to a new level. In this first cartoon, George Santos has his hand on the Bible and is being sworn into office. He says, "I, George Washington." There are many cartoons of this genre, with Santos assuming different identities. The cartoons are all hilarious. In the next cartoon, a person is watching TV, the news, and George Santos is being interviewed. The interviewer says to him, "Congressman Santos, you lied about graduating college, working for Goldman Sachs, and being Jewish." The man watching TV and listening to the interview shouts, "Hat trick, he'll fit right in." This last cartoon about Santos depicts him as Pinocchio. Sitting on Pinocchio's very long nose is a GOP elephant, and the elephant says, "It's not a lie if you believe it." That's funny. This next cartoon is a thought of the day, and we see a person in lotus position. She thinks to herself and says, "Today I will live in the moment, unless that moment is unpleasant, in which case I will eat a cookie." I think we've all had the same thought in those kinds of days. These last 2 cartoons poke fun at the rising costs all around us. First up is a thermostat showing the price of heating and a man scrutinizing the thermostat on the wall in front of him. The thermostat reads $225 a month, and there's an arrow pointing up. The man looks and wonders, Where is the down button? We've all been asking that question. When are the prices going to start coming down? This last cartoon is about the price of eggs. Again, it's a topic we just can't ignore. In some places, the price of eggs are $8 a dozen. We see the goose who laid the golden egg, 24 karat, and then we see a chicken that has laid 5 regular eggs, each with a dollar sign on it. The chicken looks at the goose and says, amateur. That's funny. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. This story is based on a piece from the local English language newspaper in Fez, Morocco. The Moroccan city of Fez, which recently hosted the Global Forum of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, has long been a melting pot of religions and cultures. Its 200-year-old Jewish cemetery symbolizes the centuries-long existence of diverse communities in Fez. Before he died, Johanna de Vico, Ohana's father, asked her to promise him one thing: if I ever die, when I'm in France, he had insisted, bring me to Fez. The father also asked his daughter to take care of the Jewish cemetery in Fez, which was his responsibility before he passed away, and his daughter agreed to both requests. And today, her father is laid to rest in the cemetery she now maintains. According to Johanna, who was born and raised in Fez, my father was a lover of Morocco and a lover of Fez. We lived in harmony. There was no tension. We all knew we were Jews, Muslims, or Catholics, and we never had any problems on that side. Located in northern Morocco, on the Wadi Fez, the city was founded in the 9th century and was the ancient capital of Morocco for hundreds of years. In the year 809, King Idris II encouraged Jews to move to Fez, so the city could benefit from their skills, principally trade. Today, that city retains a mix of cultures and identity. The Jewish neighborhood is named Mela. The word literally means salt or saline area, and is in reference to either the saline water source in the area or to the former presence of a salt warehouse. Mela is now used as the name of the Jewish quarters in other Moroccan cities like Rabat and Marrakesh. The Jewish cemetery nestled in Mela is distinguished by its semi-cylindrical tombs, which capture the history of Morocco's flourishing Jewry. When asked about how she felt when she learned that Fez was chosen to host the UNAOC's 9th Forum, Ms. Ohana said she felt proud that Fez was chosen. For Morocco, it reflects exactly the reality of our image and our culture. The Associated Press is reporting that a building collapsed in the neighborhood in Syria's northern city of Aleppo, killing at least 16 people, including one child, injuring 4 others. According to AP, which received the information from the state media report, the 5-story building in Aleppo housed about 30 people, is in Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood under the control of the US-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. It collapsed at night, according to the report. It seems that the cause of the collapse was water leakages, which weakened the structure's foundation. Dozens of firefighters, first responders, and residents covered in debris and dust were seen searching through the rubble and looking for the remaining residents and using drills and a bulldozer. The International Court of Justice confirmed that it has officially received a request from the United Nations General Assembly to give an advisory opinion on the legal consequences of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Not surprisingly, the move has been condemned by Israel and welcomed by Palestinians. The request advisory opinion is to center on Israel's, quote, occupation, settlement, and annexation, including measures aimed at altering the democratic composition, character, and status of the holy city of Jerusalem, and from its adoption of related discriminatory legislation and measures, unquote. The UN resolution also asks the court to advise on how those policies and practices, quote, affect the legal status of the occupation, unquote, and what legal consequences arise from all countries and the United Nations from this status. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has consistently called the request for world court opinion a despicable decision. Israeli police's special forces, accompanied by civilian administration inspectors, are preparing to evacuate an illegal outpost established one night near West Bank settlement of Migdalim. The special forces presented the settlers with a closed military zone order and clearly announced their intention. The outpost, dubbed Or Chaim, was established in memory of Rabbi Chaim Druckman. In response to the turmoil over the evacuation of the illegal Or Chaim outpost, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he supports settlements when done in the proper manner. That means legally. The Prime Minister said the government supports settlements when it's done in a legal way and in coordination with me and the defense establishment, which did not happen. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant ordered the evacuation of the Or Chaim outpost in defiance of religious Zionism's leader, Bezalel Smotrich, who, according to his office, was completely against the coalition agreements, which prohibited illegal settlements. 3 drones targeted a U.S. base in Syria's Al-Tanaf region, but no American troops were injured. According to a statement issued by the United States military, U.S. Central Command reported that 2 of the drones were shot down and the 3rd remaining drone hit the compound, injuring 2 members of the Syrian Free Army that were also there on the base. Reuters reported that the European Union will add 37 individual entries to its sanctions against Iran. Additionally, 2 European diplomats said that the EU will work on listing Tehran's Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, as a terrorist organization. According to the Reuters report, diplomats are saying the following: "We will adopt the 4th package of sanctions against Iran. We believe we should already start working on a 5th one to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization." Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov compared the United States' assembling of a coalition to curtail Russia to Hitler's mass murder of Jews during the Holocaust. The White House response to this call and the comparison, they called it truly offensive. Speaking to the press, White House spokesperson John Kirby said, quote, "It's almost so absurd that it's not worth responding to, other than truly offensive manner in which he tried to cast us in terms of Hitler and the Holocaust." We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. I mentioned Aleppo, a city in Syria, earlier in the broadcast. Did you know that the original name of Aleppo was Halab? That is what Jews of Aleppo call it, and how the city is referred to this day in Arabic. Aleppo, or Halab, is one of the oldest cities in the world that people are still inhabiting. Jews also call the city Aram Soba. That's the biblical name of the area. The name dates back to King David's reign, about 1000 before the Common Era, when King David's general Yoav controlled that area. It's unclear where the name Halab comes from. In Ugaritic, Halab means iron or copper or metal. But in Hebrew and Arabic, it means milk. In Roman times, there were 10,000 Jews in the Ram Soba in Halab, in Aleppo. In 921, Rav Sadia Gaon was there in Aleppo, and it's said that he brought over great rabbis to be there. In 1173, Benjamin Metudela visits and describes 1,500 Jews and several great rabbis. In another version, he counts 5,000 Jews. In about 1200, Maimonides writes a letter that mentions that Aleppo has great rabbis and learning there. When the 1948 War of Independence broke out, many Jews fled Aleppo in Syria. Many others could not get out, and they were prevented from leaving. They could not travel more than 5 miles from their homes. In 1954, that ban was lifted, and almost all the Jews left Syria. They rushed out. In 2010, the U.S. State Department estimated that there were fewer than 80 Jews in all of Syria. Today, that number is 0. I'm certain that many of you have heard of the Aleppo Codex, which was written in Tiberias in the year 920. The Aleppo Codex was authorized and authenticated by Maimonides in the 1190s. It's the oldest written version of the Bible in existence. The Codex was stored in the central synagogue of Aleppo for 500 years, hence the name, the Aleppo Codex. In 1947, the synagogue was burned very badly by anti-Jewish riots, and the Codex disappeared. It reappeared in Israel in 1958. The Aleppo Codex is now in the Israel Museum in the Shrine of the Book, together with the Dead Sea Scrolls. How it got to Israel is a spectacular story of bribery, smuggling, cloak and dagger spies, and international espionage. It's a long story for another time, and I'll tell it to you, don't worry. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.